Hi, and welcome to Online UWC Week 4, where we're going to talk about energy efficiency questions, specifically dealing with opportunities of energy saving in transportation. And today we have with us EJ, who is going to specifically be talking about the mobility revolution. And it's a great pleasure for us to host EJ, who is a senior associate at RMI, where he started in September 2014. He's currently working in the transportation practice on a region selection for a major mobility transformation project. He's also been deeply working in Fort Collins, a city which actually succeeded in adopting a goal of reducing carbon emission by 80% by 2030, which is the most aggressive target of its kind in the United States. Further, in late 2014, EJ was a part of a project geared toward developing a high-level picture of how California could reduce transportation oil consumption by 50% by 2030. So thank you so much, EJ, for joining us today, and we're looking forward to your presentation.
Well, thanks so much for the introduction, Hannah, and I'm looking forward very much to discussing the future of mobility with your class. So let me switch over here and bring the presentation up, and we'll get started. Okay, can you see the slides then?
Yes, I can see the slides. If you can click the hide button, that's also great.
Yes. Maybe.
Sometimes it doesn't go away, in which case, don't worry about it.
Yeah, does not look like it wants to cooperate. Maybe. Well, we'll just make do then. All right, so I just wanted to start off with a little introduction about Rocky Mountain Institute to give a little context around the work that I'm doing and the work that all my colleagues are doing. We're a nonprofit based in Colorado, which is in the mountainous part of the United States. And as an institution, we've been around since the early 80s, but in the last 2 years or so, we've begun to grow exponentially as the need to improve the environment has become all the more clear, and also as our work has really begun to resonate with many more people, allowing us the resources to grow. So at the core, just at the high level, the solutions that we seek and the opportunities that we try to promote are generally business-led, and that means that these approaches should actually make money rather than costing money. And we view this as the most powerful lever to scale change globally, because if it makes good business sense, people are going to do it regardless of whether or not they have an environmental agenda. So at the core, that's the type of work that we strive to do here, and we are engaged all around the world, beyond just North America. We have done numerous projects in Europe and are also currently heavily involved in China as well. So today I'm going to talk to you about transportation and a lot of the problems that it faces and the issues that it causes, and our vision for the future as to how these problems can be solved. So to frame the problem a little bit, just driving around, getting to work, and so on consumes a tremendous amount of resources, both in terms of time and money. In fact, about $200 billion per year is wasted in the United States, Germany, UK, and France in terms of time and fuel just sitting in traffic. You know, that's a lot of productive time that's not being used to any good effect. To put that in a little more personal context, in Los Angeles, the second biggest city in the United States, where the problem is particularly acute, that translates to about $6,000 per person per year in that city, time and fuel wasted just sitting in traffic. So clearly, the size of the problem is large. It also creates quite a lot of pollution in the United States and globally. Just in the US, 13 million barrels of oil are used per day for transportation. And cars and light trucks, which are mainly personal vehicles, are responsible for about half of that. Globally, 35 million barrels of oil are used per day in the overall transportation system. And that equates to about 5.9 billion metric tons of CO2 per year, which is just a phenomenal amount of greenhouse gas. And finally, personal vehicles are quite expensive. In the United States, the fully burdened cost of driving a personal vehicle on average is about 58 cents per mile. And this actually is the second largest expense for a typical household in the United States, second only to the cost of housing itself. And that's kind of crazy if you think about it. That means the average family in the United States is spending more on transportation than they are for food and recreation combined. So that creates an equity issue because it is so expensive that there are a number of people who simply cannot afford reliable and safe transportation. And finally, this very expensive asset that people have to put a significant amount of their resources into is only used 5% of the time. If you think about that, can you think of any other large, expensive investment that you make that is only getting used such a little amount? So this sort of sets the stage for the large opportunity that exists to improve the situation. So right now, the structure of transportation is such that it is just in case. We have these vehicles that meet a whole variety of needs, many of which are very rarely, if ever, actually needed. We have a car sitting in our driveway or garage 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, even though we only use it 5% of the time. Furthermore, that car likely can carry 5 to 7, or in some cases even 9 people, even though the overwhelming majority of trips are for just one person. Many people have large vehicles with four-wheel drive or big cargo capacity, but again, the typical trip is to the office or the grocery store with very little cargo, if any, needed. And finally, there's a tremendous amount of parking space allocated to these vehicles. In the United States, in urban areas, there are 2 to 3 times as many parking spaces as there are cars, which means that it is consuming a tremendous amount of very valuable land that could be put to better uses, such as open natural green space or businesses. Imagine a restaurant with some extra tables outside along the street where the parking used to be, and they could make more money. So we envision transforming that just-in-case scenario into a just-in-time scenario. First, by using shared vehicles, you can increase the utilization from 5% as it is today to somewhere between 40 and 50%. That's a much better utilization of that very expensive asset. Next, if you're sharing cars rather than owning one yourself, you can use the right type of vehicle for the type of trip you're making. This means having the opportunity to commute to work in a small, efficient car, and then also having the opportunity for a large four-wheel drive vehicle, for example, to go into the mountains on a family trip, or a pickup truck for a home improvement project. But the point is that you would only be using as much vehicle as you need for that particular trip. And so the combination of right-sizing the vehicles and drastically higher utilization brings the overall cost down from 58 cents a mile to 15 cents a mile, which is much, much more affordable. But the question is, how do we get there? Well, the answer is a seal, and not this cute baby seal that you see here, but actually a shared electric, autonomous, lightweight mobility system. So let's take a few minutes and walk through what each of those parts means. So shared, we already touched on, and this is already happening with services like Zipcar and Uber. Zipcar has cars stationed around the city, and if you're a member, you can just go up to the car and you swipe a RFID badge and it lets you in, and you're charged by the hour. And Uber allows people to summon a ride on their smartphone to pick them up wherever they are and take them to wherever they're going. So Zipcar, for example, which is a business that already exists, has utilization rates in the neighborhood of 30 to 40%. So already that's a huge improvement over the 5% of a normal personally owned vehicle. So taking business models like these and others, we would move towards mobility as a service. And what this means is, rather than owning a car yourself and maintaining it and insuring it and fueling it, you would purchase your mobility as a service, just like you purchase internet or cell phone service. You pay a monthly fee for that service, and you're given internet and cell phone. So this would work much the same way. You would pay a monthly fee, and your mobility needs would be taken care of. The next component is electric vehicles. Electric powertrains are much, much more energy efficient than the internal combustion engines that we've been using for the past 100 years. They're also vastly simpler machines. They have many, many fewer moving parts. The only fluid, for example, the only fluid you need to change in a Tesla Model S is the window wiper fluid. So you have a much simpler machine that results in lower maintenance and repair costs. Also, electric motors, due to their simplicity and some other factors, are much more durable than a traditional engine. Some studies suggest that an electric powertrain in a car could easily last 200 to 250,000 miles or more, which is far more miles actually than a typical owner could ever utilize by personally owning the car. The next component is autonomous. Many companies are working on autonomous vehicles today, including tech giants like Google and Apple, newcomer to the car game Tesla, and traditional automakers like Audi, VW, General Motors, and others. Autonomous vehicles have tremendous potential to increase utilization because, for example, they could drop you off at work or at school, and then instead of being parked in a parking space all day doing nothing, they could go off and accomplish another trip for another customer. They also have the potential to be much more efficient in terms of energy consumption. This is because the computer can drive in an optimal manner, accelerating and braking optimally. And also on the highway, for example, groups of autonomous vehicles can drive very close together, much more closely than a human could safely. And this cuts down on aerodynamic drag, just the same way as if you've ever seen a bicycle race and you see the riders ride very close to one another. They're conserving energy, and autonomous vehicles could do it in the same way. Finally, autonomous vehicles have the potential to greatly reduce the number of cars on the road. In fact, some academic studies that have been conducted here in the US on specific cities indicate that it would take only about 10% of the current vehicles on the road, if they were autonomous vehicles, to provide the same mobility to the city's population. This means that 9 out of every 10 cars currently on the road could be removed. This would free up tremendous amounts of parking that could be used for more productive purposes, and it would also, as you might imagine, greatly reduce the congestion on the streets, which further improves the fuel efficiency of transport. The final component, light. Expensive materials are needed to make cars lightweight, and with today's vehicles, they very rarely pay for themselves. That's why you usually only see these exotic materials on fairly high performance cars. However, when the vehicles become electric and when they become highly utilized, those lightweight materials can pay back much more quickly and therefore can add further efficiency to the overall system. So let's talk about AVs for a minute, because it seems like science fiction, a car that can drive itself around on its own, take you wherever you want, and then head off on its own without a driver. But actually, they're really much closer to being a reality than most people know. And we're going to go through a few examples of what companies are working on today. Google is probably in the lead when it comes to autonomous vehicles. They've been working on it for a number of years now. And here are the images of the 2 cars that they have that are actually operational. On the left is a Toyota Prius that's been converted with AV technology. You can see on the roof there are some of the sensors needed for the car to drive itself. And this car has been out on the streets of California for almost 1 million miles without any incident. In fact, the only accident that this car has been in was when a human driver was driving it through a parking lot and got in a fender bender. The computer has a perfect record. And then on the right is actually a purpose-built car by Google. This car has no steering wheel at all and has been being tested on Google's campus, shuttling employees around from building to building. But Google's not the only game in town. Audi VW has made a lot of progress as well. They recently drove a Audi A7 from Silicon Valley near San Francisco, 536 miles to Las Vegas for a large technology conference. And while on the highway, the car autonomously conducted itself down the road. The picture there, you see it going into Nevada, getting close to Las Vegas. And so this car was a big step forward for Audi. Also, Mercedes has been doing some work. This is a picture of an actual car that is a concept car, recently shown for the first time at an auto show. And while this exact car is not likely to ever come into mass production, they are using it as a test bed for a variety of autonomous technologies that they could implement in future Mercedes. And other car manufacturers as well are making various progress towards autonomous cars, but these guys are probably the leaders. But you know, we're not starting from scratch. There is actually a lot of semi-autonomous technology available in cars that are on dealer showrooms today. For example, there are cars now that can parallel park themselves and squeeze themselves into very tight spots. There are systems which, when on the highway, automatically keep the car in the lane and also systems that allow the car to change lanes automatically. There are systems that warn you if a vehicle is in your blind spot and you're going to change lanes. There are automatic braking assist technologies where the car senses objects or other vehicles in front of you and determines that if the driver is not reacting in time to avoid collision, the car automatically applies the brakes and slows the vehicle down. And also adaptive cruise control. Plain old cruise control, of course, has been around for a long time, where you set the speed that you want to go on the highway and the car maintains that. But adaptive cruise control in modern cars actually observe the conditions around you, including traffic and curves in the road, and adapt the speed accordingly without input from the driver. So these are all technologies that will make up a part of the fully autonomous car and are providing a critical pathfinder on the way to eventually having cars that are completely autonomous. So, the vision of the future for transportation that we have has some benefits and some hurdles. We believe, of course, that the benefits outweigh the hurdles. So let's walk through what a few of those advantages and disadvantages are. First of all, as I mentioned earlier, drastically lower cost due primarily to the higher utilization and the right sizing of the vehicles. In the US alone, this has the potential to unlock $1 trillion in savings, which means $1 trillion in potential business opportunities for entrepreneurs like yourself coming into business in the future. There's also much greater efficiency because of the electric drivetrains, the lighter vehicles, and the fact that the cars can conduct themselves in an optimal driving pattern. Safety is also going to be a major benefit of this technology. Although we may not like to admit it, human error is a factor in over 90% of car accidents, and this results in 1.24 million deaths globally per year. The fact is that autonomous vehicles will eliminate a lot of that error because they don't drink and drive, they don't text while driving or make cell phone calls, they'll never be distracted, and they never get tired. So the automated vehicles have the potential to drastically reduce the human cost and the financial cost associated with all those accidents. But make no mistake, there are a number of challenges that have to be overcome to realize this future. The first one, and in my view probably the biggest one, is consumer acceptance. Are people really ready to let computers drive us around? You know, you have to get into the car and sit down, and your hands are not on a steering wheel and your feet are not on the brake pedal, and the car just takes you from point A to point B. That's going to require a significant shift in mindset for people. Also, in the same vein, not owning a personal vehicle is a major behavioral change. Outsourcing your transportation to a company that's just going to bring a vehicle when you need it is certainly not the American way, and in many places around the world, that is going to be a major hurdle to overcome. The next issue is going to be just figuring out the legal ramifications. In most places, current laws don't really take into account autonomous vehicles. They're not even legal in many states in the United States. So there's a significant amount of work that the legislatures around the world will have to do in order to fully enable autonomous vehicles. There's also going to be infrastructure upgrades needed. We didn't touch on this earlier, but to fully realize the benefits of autonomous vehicles, they best operate segregated from human-driven vehicles. So this could be in the form of an AV-only lane on the highway or an AV-only district in the center of a big city. But this is going to require investment in order to create this infrastructure. And finally, there is, of course, cost. Today, AV technology is very expensive. the most advanced features are typically only found on more luxury vehicles. So a lot of work has to be done to drive down the cost so that it's affordable to everyday people. So, what is our vision of the future? Our vision is that you will wake up in the morning, and when you're ready to go to school or work, you'll take out your smartphone and summon a car that's just right to get you to work. It would be likely a small, efficient electric vehicle. That car would come over to your house and pick you up, taking you in a dedicated AV-only lane with no traffic, straight to work or school in the most efficient way possible, and drop you off and then continue to execute more runs for other people. On the weekend, for example, maybe you want to go skiing in the mountains. Well, then you summon a large four-wheel drive vehicle with space for the whole family and some ski gear, and it can take you up to the mountains safely and conveniently. This optimized system will drastically reduce traffic, which will reduce the amount of time people waste just sitting going nowhere, which will save a tremendous amount of time and money for everybody. And then most accidents will eventually fade into the past as human error is taken out of the equation, and this will not only save countless lives, but also billions of dollars in damage and medical expenses. And finally, this solution will provide more equitable transportation, since mobility now will only cost 25% of what it used to. Remember, going from 58 cents per mile to 15 cents per mile. It will be much more affordable to a greater number of people and bring greater equity to transportation. And this cost savings will also unlock a whole new entrepreneurial ecosystem that will spring to life to build business models that can capture some of this savings. So with that, Hannah, I'd like to take any questions that you might have.
Great. Thank you so much for this incredibly interesting presentation. Okay, so let me think about a few questions. So first of all, like you mentioned that using that all of the improvements that you mentioned could lead to limiting the amount of time that people spend in traffic. But and by that I mean the dollar savings. How much money do people in general in America spend on driving a car? What's the annual cost? And the $6,000 for someone living in LA is out of what amount?
Okay, so the average American spends about $7,000 a year on the direct costs of owning a car. So that's, purchasing the car itself, insuring it, maintaining it, purchasing fuel for the car. And that equates over the entire country to about $1 trillion in direct costs. Now, if you include things like parking, building and maintaining roads, and all the injuries and deaths that come with the total automotive system, in the United States, that equates to about $3 trillion a year.
All right. Wow, that's a lot of money being spent on cars, and that actually brings me to the next question, because I'm clearly a European. I live in London, and there seems to be a different perspective, a different point of view over the other side of the pond, which is investing more heavily in public transportation to limit the number of times that people may want to use private vehicles. Where when I lived in US, it was my impression that that US has always been car first because of the distances, because of the spread of the general territory. So what is your point of view? How do you decide whether we should invest in public or private transportation?
Well, investment in public transportation is very important, and in our larger cities, it can be very effective. In New York, for example, something over 30% of people commute by public transit every day, and actually almost half of the people commute by a means other than a single occupancy vehicle. So that might be walking, biking, public transit. Um, Now, New York is certainly an outlier for the United States. It's a very large, dense city. In the vein of London, we don't have many other places like that. Los Angeles, the traffic is so bad because it is a city of many people, but it is also spread over a tremendous area. Um, and so it's harder to make public transit work there. Um, but I think also within the large cities in the U.S., part of it is just the history and the culture. People here are very used to hopping in their car and going where they want to go, and there is not the same cultural acceptance of public transportation the way there is in Europe.
Cool, cool, cool. Then I guess the next question is a more general question. So one of the things that you talked about in your presentation was the fact that automated or self-driving vehicles are not as easily accepted by the public. And I also think that um, another element that's probably not as readily accepted is that people actually want to drive. They enjoy driving, and they enjoy driving bigger cars because it's a sign of status. How do you convince people to get into those crazy tiny cars that Google has been designing?
That's a great question. Well, I think it is true that many people enjoy driving when it's nice driving through the country, through the mountains in the open space. I know I do myself. But I think you'd find many fewer people who enjoy driving in the gridlock of a city. And this vision for the future that I've presented is mainly applicable to urban areas. This is not going to work out in the prairie of Kansas for a variety of reasons. So it's really geared towards the big, dense urban cities, which account for the majority of the people in the country. Now, you're absolutely right also about that a vehicle is a status symbol, not only in the U.S. but in a lot of the world, and that's certainly a hurdle that has to be cleared. I think that one of the things that will contribute to success is that once the vehicle is not yours anymore, but just a service that you're purchasing, you're going to care less about what that vehicle is, because it's not a statement about you personally. When you hail a taxi cab on the street, you don't care that much if it's a Crown Victoria or a Toyota Prius or whatever it might be. You just want to ride somewhere. So when that car is no longer sitting in your driveway announcing to your neighbors, I have this much money to have this nice car, it's just what comes and picks you up, I think that will lower the barrier, although there still will certainly be a big challenge there.
Yes, that's a good point, actually. If it's not something that you own, you probably will care less about what it actually looks like and more about the service that it delivers. Another thing that you were talking about, which was quite interesting, is the materials. So you talked about exotic materials that those cars are made of. What are these exotic materials? How do you make these materials? What's so different about them? And is there some sort of like an energy trade-off that has to be made in order to produce them in the first place?
Yeah, that's a great question. So just a little background is that the biggest material in a modern car is plain old steel. They've come up with better alloys and more efficient uses of it, but the cars are still mainly steel. Now, alternative materials that could increase performance and decrease weight are primarily aluminum and carbon fiber composites. You are starting to see some aluminum in more common vehicles. For example, the Ford F-150, which is the best-selling car in the United States, recently redesigned with a good bit of aluminum and shed some significant mass. But aluminum adds a significant amount of cost to the car up front, and it also requires specialized tools and skills to repair it if the vehicle is in an accident. So for example, high-end Audis have aluminum body frames, and if you have an accident in one of them, you can only take it to a specialized body shop, which charges you a lot of money. Carbon fiber composites are even more expensive, and right now you really are only seeing them in very high performance cars, with the notable exception of the BMW i3, which was an electric vehicle designed from the ground up as an electric vehicle, and they took advantage of carbon fiber to reduce enough weight that the cost of the carbon fiber was offset by being able to use a smaller battery. Part of the reason that these materials are not being added to cars more easily is because cars only being driven an average of 12,000 miles a year, the customer doesn't see the benefit of those lighter materials until many, many years down the road. But in the autonomous vision, when cars are being driven 4 and 5 and 6 times as many miles per year, those lightweight materials will offer economic benefit much more quickly. Now, as far as energy intensity goes, in other words, the amount of energy to produce those materials, carbon fiber does take quite a lot. And at RMI, we've actually done the analysis that shows that by putting a lot of carbon fiber into the car, if the car is not driven a lot, the fuel savings from the lighter weight is actually not offset by the extra carbon required to produce the carbon fiber. So again, you need a highly utilized vehicle. And then recycling carbon fiber is a problem. Steel and aluminum you can recycle very easily. It's done all the time. Carbon fiber recycling is very difficult. There's a lot of research being done on that topic, because it definitely will become more and more important in the future, especially, for example, in Germany, you know, companies are responsible for the entire life cycle of their product from cradle to grave, so they're interested in recycling carbon fiber, but that is very much just on the cutting edge and not really at the full commercial scale yet.
Cool. That's a very, very interesting topic, actually. And I'm also looking forward to see more innovation. Perhaps we discover materials that actually, you know, have the same potential as the carbon components, but do not have the drawbacks. Then, okay, I think I have one more question before I have the final question. So really, two more questions. The first question is for the entrepreneurs among us. What are some other business models that you could think of for the challenges, for the biggest challenges that really need to be disturbed, any markets that need to be disturbed by entrepreneurs to really improve the situation?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think ultimately one of the business models that's going to be key are the companies that will provide this mobility as a service, where you know, they will own and manage these fleets of vehicles that they can then provide to their customers on an as-needed basis. And there is potential to do this before autonomous technology is ready as well. In fact, there are small outfits out there in some very select markets that are trying to do on a small scale that very thing, providing a car just when you need it. So that's definitely one area. Another is in the electrification of fleets. You know, outside of the private vehicle realm, you have corporate and government fleets of vehicles, which in some cases are very sizable. And there are business opportunities out there today for companies who might provide electric vehicles on an optimized basis, where they really look at the company's detailed needs and may find, for example, that instead of needing 1,000 cars for a city government, you only need 700 if you use them in an optimal way. And so the company can provide um, uh, fleet vehicles as a service and manage them and maintain them, and the city, pays a flat fee for this service. So that's another possibility. Um, and there are many, many others. In fact, my colleagues are working on generating these business models in the hopes of launching them. Um, and I think with creativity, you could come up with a long, long list.
Great, great, great. So the final question is, how long will it take to, reduce the cost of transportation by 1 trillion? You said, I think in your materials, 2050, or was it in the general materials that I have reviewed? But when can we start seeing first signs of it other than the Ubers and Zipcars?
Well, our goal at the Rocky Mountain Institute is to work in a very focused way in one region in the United States beginning this year, and that's the work that I'm working on right now. And our goal is within that region to move 20% of people away from single occupancy vehicle trips towards alternative transportation, whether that is mass transit, um, mobility as a service, walking, biking, whatever, 20%, and that would be obviously over the next 5 years. And then the hope is to take the successes and lessons learned in that region and begin to scale it more broadly, both in the United States and abroad. To get to the full, complete vision, I think is going to take a significant amount of time, and it's hard to put a number on that. There's a lot of things that are out of anyone's control individually, like advancing the technology, regulatory acceptance, and so on, that all have to be pursued. But it will be a decades-long process, I think, to fully realize the vision.
All right. Well, hopefully we will have time to do that before a complete environmental crisis. But fingers crossed that lots of different ideas like this will really take off in the next decade or so. So thank you so much, EJ, for speaking to us. It was wonderful to hear about this cutting edge of innovation in car making and transportation. Yes, we hope to hear from you at some point in the future.
All right. Thank you
Thanks so
very
much
for having me.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.